Reentry planning is something that has become critical to parole preparation. At one time, reentry services were generally provided when a person was 6 months from their release date. However, that made it incredibly difficult for the Parole Commission to grant parole because they didn't have a good view of what the person was going to be doing when they went home. So it was hard to convince them that somebody was going to be able to remain at liberty without breaking the law and be successful on supervision. In order to improve communication with the Parole Commission and ensure that people had access to resources when they left, reentry planning started happening 6 months prior to a parole hearing. By starting reentry planning 6 months prior to a parole hearing, we were able to present a complete plan at the parole hearing and, when parole is granted, guide the candidate through the parole process and ensure that they connected to the reentry community and received the resources that they needed to make a successful transition home. The first part of a reentry plan is the home plan. This is the most important part of the reentry plan because people need housing in order to have a stable living environment, and maintaining a residence is one of the things that a parole officer has to look at. Without a stable residence, someone can easily violate and return to prison. Housing can be accomplished in several ways. There are wraparound transitional houses that cover housing, employment, medical services, mental health, and drug treatment. If a candidate is going to one of these types of transitionals, no more work needs to be done. There are also transitionals that provide more limited housing services and use community resources for other needed services based on a client's needs. With these cases, you may need to do a little work once you get past the housing plan. Also, a candidate may be returning home to a friend or family member. In those cases, all additional services will need to be scheduled prior to the candidate's release. The second most important part of a reentry plan is the employment plan. If a candidate is not going to a wraparound transitional, they'll need to find themselves a job. In some cases, this can be done before a person even leaves prison, and a job offer letter can be added to their parole packet. This makes a great argument for parole because the person will already have a house and a job, which are two of the things that the parole officer is going to have to look at. If a job is not available, a candidate can be paired with a vocational training or job placement service. Also, if a candidate does not have a GED or is in college, they may choose to seek schooling instead of employment. That's okay, but the plan should be documented. There are also candidates that will need additional services as part of their reentry plan. These services may include mental health treatment or drug treatment, along with a variety of other things like transportation. Candidates should be paired as much as possible with these services prior to their release. So instead of having to seek services during the incredibly difficult and stressful time of transition, they already have an address, a provider, and an appointment. All they have to do is show up. When a complete reentry plan is presented to the Parole Commission, they can see the candidate moving forward in success. There's also a plan that can be submitted to the DPSCS reentry coordinator to make sure that the home plan on file matches the file with the Parole Commission. And the providers can be engaged at the time of the candidate's release so that they're expecting the candidate there for services and the transition goes smoothly. One mistake candidates often make with their reentry plan is that they try to file numerous services for the same thing. The Parole Commission doesn't want to see 5 different houses and 10 different jobs. This doesn't create a reentry plan, it just creates a list of options. If you have more than one option for housing or several job offers, that's okay. Choose the one that you would choose if you were leaving today. Build that into your reentry plan, and then show later in your letters section that you do have other options to choose from should your initial reentry plan fall through. This will strengthen your parole packet and the reentry plan rather than making